Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. It was a big day today at the International Court of Justice. We, for the first time, saw the hearings and the rule of the International Court of Justice that they stated provisional measures against Israel. And today we're going to discuss this issue with Daniel McAdams. He's the executive director of Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, thank you so much for dedicating this time for me and for the audience of Syriana Analysis. We're going to discuss this very important issue, and I think it was a historic day. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Kevork. It's great to be back with you.
Great to have you. Actually, today, International Court of Justice decision was, if I want to summarize it, Israel should take all measures to prevent the commission of acts specified in the Genocide Convention. Israel should take measures to prosecute and punish instigators of genocide. Israel should allow humanitarian aid and basic needs to enter the Gaza Strip. Israel should take measures to prevent the destruction of evidence that the court can take for final ruling. And finally, Israel should file a report to the ICJ within 1 month to show its commitment to the temporary measures. Now, I want to show a very small segment of what the judge said in this regard. She said the International Court of Justice finds that there is a real and imminent risk of genocide in Gaza, but falls short, of course, of calling for a ceasefire. According to Thomas Fazi, he says it simply calls upon Israel to take actions to prevent genocide. Let's take a look what she said exactly in this regard, and we come back.
It recalls that the military operation conducted by Israel after 7 October 2023 has resulted inter alia in tens of thousands of deaths and injuries and the destruction of homes, schools, medical facilities, and other vital infrastructure, as well as displacement on a massive scale. The court notes that the operation is ongoing and that the Prime Minister of Israel announced on 18 January 2024 that the war, I quote, will take many more long months, end of quote. At present, many Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have no access to the most basic foodstuffs, potable water, electricity, essential medicines, or heating. The World Health Organization has estimated that 15% of the women giving birth in Gaza Strip will experience complications, and indicates that maternal and newborn death rates are expected to increase due to the lack of access to medical care. In these circumstances, the court considers that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further before the court renders its final judgment. In light of the foregoing, the court considers that there is urgency in the sense that there is a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused to the rights found by the court to be plausible before it gives its final decision. The court concludes on the basis of the aforementioned considerations that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible. The court recalls that it has the power under its statute, when a request for provisional measures has been made, to indicate measures that are in whole or in part other than those requested. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court finds that the measures indicated need not be identical to those requested. The court considers that, with regard to the present situation, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group.
Daniel, we heard her. There is a big division in the online community and among experts. Some say it's a historic win for Palestine. Others say the provisional measures are not enough. And Israeli propagandists also claim it's a victory for them. Where do you stand in this case? What's your take?
It's completely understandable. Pardon me, how people would be frustrated that they didn't call for a ceasefire. Um, but I think if you look at the bigger picture, if you go back to just a few weeks ago when the U.S. was asked about it, and they said there's absolutely no basis for them even to hear this. So did the U.K., so did Germany, so did Israel. They shouldn't even be considering this. This is absurd. They should throw it out immediately. Now, all of a sudden, and this is a preliminary conclusion, not a final conclusion, a preliminary conclusion that it's possible that genocide occurred. So even if the Palestinians and those that support them didn't get everything they had hoped for, what they got was, I think, something astounding, which is serious standing and a serious benchmark laid that will stick with this conflict as long as it continues.
Actually, do you also agree with me that from now till the decision comes, Israel will be like under a microscope, right? Like every action they do, whether it's in the Gaza Strip or even in the neighboring areas in the West Bank, they will be watched very closely, and they will always be this will be like a stain on them, accused of committing genocide until the final decision comes from this case. So this will add enormous pressure on Israel, or do you think they don't care about that?
Well, I don't think Ben Gvir is going to lose any sleep at night over this, or Netanyahu. However, if you think about Israel's allies, and especially in Europe, they're going to be very concerned because they've been collaborating. France has been collaborating. Germany's been collaborating. Germany sent weapons. The UK has been collaborating, sending military equipment and advice. They are now going to have that shadow over them that they are assisting something that may well be ruled a genocide in the future. And I think that is going to give a lot of energy to the pro-Palestinian protesters in these countries. We've already seen massive, massive protests. Now they really have something concrete to put their fingers on, to use as leverage against their governments, to try to force them to stop collaborating with Israel as it's potentially committing a genocide.
Yeah. Do you see also this, whatever happened, like in whatever context we put what happened on October the 7th, but what followed afterwards? Do you see that the Palestinian case, for example, before the October of 7 was put on the shelf and nobody was remembering the suffering of the Palestinians? Arabic countries were negotiating with Israel for normalization of relations. And all of a sudden, the Palestine case became like an international outcry. Everybody is speaking about the Palestinian case. Like it's no more an Arabic issue. People who were passive about Palestine, they're active now about the Palestinian case all over the world, especially in the United States and in European countries. Is it something that you think the Palestinian case will be revived and we may head toward the two-state solution in this regard, or the public opinion doesn't matter?
I think it's absolutely the case. I mean, the level to which this rose in the view, in the consciousness of Americans, especially, but certainly Europeans and Indonesians, I mean, as you say, literally the rest of the world, is astounding. You're right; it has been kind of on the back burner. Every few years, there's something that happens, and a bunch of Palestinians are killed, and then everyone goes on to the rest of their lives. Something fundamental has changed, and if you look at the opinion polls, especially in the U.S., especially among young people, the Generation Z, a very, very large, a considerable majority of them are absolutely opposed to the policy of the U.S. government of being joined at the hip with Israel, no matter what Israel does. That is very, very significant. We did not see that before this happened. So there's been a huge shift, and it seems that all Israel is able to do to counter it, A, is tell a bunch of lies that have been proven to be lies, and B, when that doesn't work, to scream that everyone's an anti-Semite. Well, that may have worked, a couple of decades ago or even a couple of years ago, but it's been so overused now that it's simply not working anymore. So that also is a huge development.
Yeah. How do you explain this big shift in the mood and the public opinion in Generation Z, as you mentioned, for example, in the United States? Like in the past decade, I have seen so much effort to propagandize the younger generation and push them into cultural wars among each other, black and white, and identity politics, and gender issues, etc., etc. And now you see that these people are the most active in the Palestine case.
Well, if you look at this generation is going to suffer for the excesses of its predecessor generations. The boomers squandered the affluence that came after World War II, and the rest of the generations after that have squandered, our financial prowess and our respectability overseas. So they basically are looking at a future that, for the first time probably in American history, looks much more grim than that of their parents and grandparents. So you combine that with the emergence of social media. Now, there's plenty to criticize in social media, absolutely. But you saw, for example, the rise of the TikTok videos highlighting the plight of the Palestinians. That was an incredible motivating issue, I think, for young people, because they could relate to it. They could relate with being the underdog. They could relate to having a boot stuck on their neck. And I think it just hit the perfect tone. By contrast, Israel's propaganda fell completely flat. It felt like we were back in the 1950s again, and it was just an utter and complete disaster.
Yeah. Just last question about this particular topic, and that is, do you also see that because of the Palestine case, people, especially the Generation Z, they are so suspicious now of the mainstream media and whatever the United States says, that in any other case, they're going to stand on the opposite side? Like this could reflect positively, for example, on the Syrian case, and in other cases, that a lot of people were fooled to believe that this was a noble case, that the United States has to intervene in these countries.
And it's not just the current Palestinian case, but if you look at the past few years, the lies that were told about Ukraine and Russia, the lies that were told when they shut down and locked down the country. And remember, this affected a lot of young Americans more than anyone else, young people who are forced to stay home because of claims about COVID that were not true, especially with young people. And suicide rates skyrocketed. So now they've been seen that they've been lied to over and over again by their government, by literally every person in the mainstream media. And so they've just set a pox in all your houses. I don't believe any of the stuff that you're serving up. I'm going to find my sources elsewhere. No, that's not always the best thing to do. However, I think it's a healthy attitude. And it reminds me, it's nice to see the youth going back to being rebels again and not believing the stuff they're told by the older generation.
Exactly. This is the first statement of Benjamin Netanyahu after the preliminary rule of the ICJ. This is what he has to say in this regard.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization. On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated the most horrific atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it vows to repeat these atrocities again and again and again. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
I mean, after all the genocidal statements by Israeli officials, including Netanyahu himself, what is he trying to do here and in such a video and in such a video statement?
Well, you have to admire. He's certainly got chutzpah. There's no question about it. But bringing in the Holocaust, my good friend Max Blumenthal, I think, tweeted out earlier today that the idea of equating what obviously on October 7th has been proven to be not anywhere near what it was claimed to be. Every one of the claims about it, and this is not to justify it in any way, but the claims about the putting the babies in the ovens, the rapes, the mass killing of children in front of them, that was all disproven. It was all proven to be lies. Not not you and I, Kevork, talking, but in Israeli media. So all of these things have been proven to be lies. So to equate what did happen, even as bad as it may have been, with the
Yes.
Holocaust is an unbelievable injustice to the actual gravity of the Holocaust, of what actually happened in World War II. So the desperation of having to dig back to that to make your case now, I think it shows how flimsy their case really is.
I just want to show a very small segment of a video in the aftermath and the before of the bombing of the Gaza Strip. I was watching this video today, and I will show you guys the destruction is undescribable, right? Undescribable. You will see it now on this video. Just give it a second. Yeah, see, I mean, the destruction is not normal, you know. This doesn't look like they're I mean, look, the entire neighborhoods are completely obliterated. It doesn't look like they are really caring about the civilians in the Gaza Strip.
And they haven't tried to hide it. How many videos have we seen of Israeli soldiers laughing and dedicate? I'm going to dedicate this to my wife, as they blew up a few apartment buildings, complexes, high rises. They're not trying to hide it. For me, and I didn't watch the entire ICJ case, but the parts that I did watch, the thing that really struck me is when they made the case of how out in the open, how the officials openly bragged, the Israeli officials openly bragged about what they were doing. They were going to wipe out all the Palestinians in Gaza. It's something that they haven't tried to hide. And there you have the proof right here in the pictures. It's astonishing. It does harken back to, post Hiroshima, Japan or something.
Yeah. Actually, I was watching the spokesperson here of the State Department, and this is about a video, guys, that I showed you yesterday on Syriana Analysis by ITV in Gaza, where a man holding a white banner and a white flag was shot dead, executed by the Israeli occupation forces there. And this is what the spokesperson of the State Department has to say in this regard.
Yeah. Go ahead in the back.
Yeah. You may have had the chance to see some of the footage shot by our cameraman in the Gaza Strip, widely shared online, showing a group of men waving a white flag, representing no threat whatsoever, unarmed, and moving south to try and reach some relatives. The IDF opened fire, as you can see on that video, and killed one of them, Abu Salul. I wonder what your response to that is, and whether you think from watching that video, whether that potentially represents a war crime.
I have seen that footage, but I am not going to comment on the specifics around that, given I'm not aware of the full circumstances on the ground. And as we've said before, this is not an American operation. But beyond that, please don't. I'm happy to take your questions if you'll allow me. To answer. I don't interrupt you, and I ask you to not do the same. As a general matter, though, we have not parsed our words about the moral and strategic imperative that the government of Israel and the Israeli security forces have to take every effort possible to minimize civilian casualties and minimize impact on civilians. As it relates to the footage that your organization has shared, again, I'm just going to refrain from commenting on specific operations, as we do not have full circumstances of what on the ground from here. This isn't an American operation. I'm not on the ground there to speak to the full parameters of the situation. But again, any civilian death is heartbreaking, and any civilian life lost is one too many. And we have made that clear with the Israelis, and will continue to do so.
Beyond that comment about it being heartbreaking, which is a platitude we often hear, would you urge, given that you broadly support IDF operations in the Gaza Strip, would you support a Israeli investigation of what happened in that video? Given that they're waving a white flag and they represented no threat.
That is for the IDF to undertake and determine based on the circumstances of that situation. What I will say is that we have been clear to our Israeli partners that they need to take every possible measure to avoid civilian harm during an operation and investigate credible allegations of law or of war violations when they arise. But that is for our Israeli partners in the IDF to speak to.
I mean, when I watch such statements, I ask myself this question: aren't they concerned if Israel is found guilty by the ICJ of violating the Genocide Convention in the coming months or years, that the U.S. officials will be considered complicit in genocide?
I don't think they're, pardon me, I don't think they're as worried themselves. I think they've always felt they were above the law. But when I listen to this person, this I just think about how much they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for these people. I mean, it's just astonishing. Even the liars in the past, if you think about the previous spokespersons for government, I just don't know. I don't know that I remember anyone being as low as this team that we have here now. But the fact of the matter is, they're working for an administration that has put itself in a situation now where it's backed into a corner. All of their lying and prevarications have done nothing but get the president in a terrible situation now. Giving Israel carte blanche from the very beginning has done nothing but harmed this administration, and now they're stewing in their own juices now.
Yeah. Daniel, this International Court of Justice is supposed to bring justice, right? And many people around the world support Palestine today because it's a matter of justice for them. As the executive director of Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, what does justice for the Palestinians look like to you?
Well, our perspective here is that we're non-interventionists. We believe that the United States government should not be involved in the affairs of other countries. And I think if we had practiced non-interventionism from the beginning, we wouldn't be seeing these things happening. If you look at Ukraine and Russia, if the U.S. hadn't overthrown the sovereign government of Ukraine in 2014, we wouldn't be seeing a devastating war where at least 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died. If the U.S. hadn't done what we're seeing right here with this guy, given carte blanche no matter what Israel does, and write the check, pay the bills, and send the weapons, we would not be talking about the slaughter that's going on in Gaza right now. So for me, the justice for the Palestinians, at least from what I believe we can do, would be completely to pull out, not another penny for Israel, not even a slingshot, not even a squirt gun for Israel, and to completely pull out all support. Now, that won't make up for past harm, but at least it will put an end to future harm that may come to them.
Yeah, but RFK says that Israel is a aircraft carrier for the United States in the region. It's the ears and the eyes of the United States in the region. I mean, the U.S. is still a superpower. It's a hegemon, right? They need a country like Israel in the region. So he is arguing from the perspective that it's our ally. Israel is doing our bidding. They're our ears and eyes. We need Israel. We have to support Israel. How do you respond to that?
I mean, to that question, I would say, for what? To do what? To keep our illegal bases in Syria, to keep occupying Iraq and stealing their stuff. I mean, for what? What purpose does Israel serve other than to make the rest of the Arab world and the region, the Middle East region, hate the United States? It's such an absurd statement. And it's particularly disturbing to hear someone like RFK, who in the past has stood for peace, to sound like John Bolton on steroids. This is a neocon talking point that Israel is doing us this great favor, by making everyone hate us and want to kill us. It's just very, very saddening.
Actually, it is. I am personally was disappointed by RFK. Every time I have high hopes, and I think somebody finally in the US may serve not only the interests of the Americans, but also may serve our interests, and that is lasting peace in the region. And then I get disappointed, like Tulsi Gabbard, like RFK. And in this, after the onslaught against Gaza, I really find hard time to differentiate between them and any neocon hawk. And it feels to me like RFK is just like he's talking logic and the truth about everything, and then when it comes to Israel, he just like there's something in his brain that flips, like all of a sudden he becomes John Bolton or something. It's crazy.
And he doesn't have he would obviously it's required that American politicians bow down to Israel, whatever. The thing is, he wasn't required to go as far as he went. He could have said, I support Israel. Of course I support Israel, but I have a different approach. I think Israel is better supported by us working for peace in the region or something like this. He could have, mouthed the words, and then he would have people like me. I mean, I was ready to register to vote. I haven't voted in 2 decades, right? I was ready to register and vote for him, and he wouldn't have had to do much. But what he did was so astonishing and so depressing to me that I'm just glad I found out before it went too much further what's really going on with him.
So you're not voting in 2024?
No, I haven't voted in 2 decades.
Great. This is the same advice I give to people when they ask me here in the elections in Germany. I say, don't vote. Whoever you want vote, you may be complicit in whatever comes next,
Exactly.
But you have a President Biden. What happened in the Gaza Strip was horrible. And there are other players in the region trying to change this suffering, right? Trying to alleviate or trying to remove the pain from the Palestinians, one of which is the Ansarullah movement in Yemen. And they say, according to their approach, that they are following actually adopting the Genocide Convention, which says that the nations have the obligation to prevent genocide. So they are imposing an embargo on Israeli cargo ships. And the Americans came and they, on behalf of Israel, they're bombing Yemen, right? And I was watching this video of Joe Biden. I don't know, guys, if you watch this video, but I think these 8 seconds represent all the foreign policy of the U.S. in the region. Let's take a look together first. Biden.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working? Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
I mean, are they working? No. Will the horses continue? Yes. So why are they bombing? I mean, do they know what are they doing, or they think their inaction will be interpreted as weakness in the region?
It's like the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's just that you're right. In a nutshell, and I actually wrote an article about that because it's in a nutshell. This is U.S. foreign policy, the definition of insanity. But we saw the spectacle, and I'm sure you followed it, Kevork. We saw the spectacle yesterday of American warships trying to accompany 2 massive cargo ships from the Maersk line that apparently had weapons for Israel. To navigate the Red Sea, and we were going to intimidate those Houthis. How dare they stand up to us? And what happened? Even after 9 rounds of bombing, they started firing on not only the cargo ships, but the U.S. naval vessels, military vessels, all of which turned around and left. And Maersk said, from this point on, we can't even trust the U.S. military escorts. We got to go around the Horn of Africa. It is a massive military defeat. And listen, everyone loves a David and Goliath story, right? This is a plucky little poor, impoverished country, the victim of years and years of war, who are standing up to this American Leviathan. And it's a story that most of the world, I think, loves watching.
Actually, the other day I was reading a tweet on X. I don't remember who wrote it, but he said, Yemen is the hero that they said it's Ukraine. They said Ukraine is the hero, but now it's Yemen that is a hero trying. And Yemen is a very poor country. They suffered a lot in the past decade, and it's considered the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world, according to the UN. There were acts of genocide against the Yemeni people. American bombs were falling over the heads of the Yemenis in the past years, used by the Saudis and the Emirati side. I mean, what difference can these few bombs make in this regard? I mean, Yemen is a very difficult geographical area for the Americans to fight against the Yemenis. And these people look like really determined this time. I mean, who would have expected this in 2024 and 2023, that the Yemenis would come one of the poorest nations in the world, challenging the strongest country in the world, right? Do you see this like there is a shift in the mood? The people are more emboldened to challenge the United States. And this is coming more or less after the Ukraine war, which was the Russians proved that the Americans are not an invincible force which they tried to overthrow. First, they tried to overthrow Assad and they failed. And then they tried in Ukraine. And now this is the second failure. It seems like there is something shifting, right, in the people's morale and mood against the United States.
And it moves slowly, but it moves. You're right. And I think I was just reading this morning that the U.S. government is trying to convince the Kurds to team up with Assad. Now, you guys, you gotta team up with them, because essentially the U.S. is being chased out of Syria and Iraq, and that's a fact. We know at least that they're talking to the Iraqis. It's like whack-a-mole. No matter where the U.S. drops a bomb, someone else pops up somewhere else and lobs some missiles into U.S. bases somewhere. The U.S. is stretched so thin, and they've proven, as you say, to be a paper tiger. Now, that doesn't mean they can't, have a devastating effect with their weapons, but they have far fewer of the weapons since they've given most of them to Ukraine, and they've been proven to, as you say, not be very effective in actual warfare in Ukraine. So I think that it does embolden groups like in Yemen. It emboldens Hezbollah. It emboldens Iraq and Syria resistance forces, and the U.S. is sitting here, feeling like it's. I think I wrote about this in a piece I did the other day. The Lilliputians, all of these little people, and all of a sudden Goliath is tied down by so many of them, and I think that's where the U.S. is right now.
Yeah. Before I go to the last part of this conversation, Daniel, this is a breaking news just before we joined this live streaming together. It's coming from Yemen. The Yemeni army has announced that they have targeted a UK-British oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden, South Yemen, a statement from Yemeni army. In vindication of the oppressed Palestinian people and in support and solidarity with our brothers in the Gaza Strip and within the response to American-British aggression against our country, Yemeni naval forces carried out a targeting operation on the British oil ship Marlin Luanda in the Gulf of Aden, using a number of appropriate naval missiles. The strike was direct and resulted in the burning of the vessel. Yemeni armed forces persist with their military operations, enforcing a blockade on Israeli navigation in the Red and Arabian Seas until a ceasefire is achieved in Gaza and food and medicine are allowed in the besieged Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. The Yemeni armed forces confirmed that they are taking all military procedures within the right to defend dear Yemen and in confirmation of the continuous practical solidarity with the Palestinian people. I mean, before the Brits and the Americans bombed Yemen, their cargo ships were not targeted by the Yemenis. It's like they're shooting themselves in the leg.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, what will be the response? Aside from more airstrikes, which even Biden in your clip said, well, they don't work, but we're going to still do them. Aside from continued or increased airstrikes, is Biden going to launch a ground invasion of Yemen? I mean, can you imagine the stupidity of this administration? They are left with no options. And what else? Another thing that happened today, Kevork, was a group of 30 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, now Republicans and Democrats, 30 of them sent a letter to President Biden saying, where do you get the authority to make war on Yemen? Because we didn't give it to you, and you need to have authority. So you're starting to see some stirrings in both the Senate and the House saying, what the heck is going on? You do not have the authority to take us into this war.
Yeah. I mean, there is another country that Biden and before him, of course, Trump and Obama, they didn't have any, let's say, legal ground to send troops, and that is my country, Syria. And as you mentioned, there are talks nowadays between the Iraqi government and the U.S. Government to finally leave the country. If the Americans are willing to withdraw from Iraq, does this also mean that they will withdraw from Syria? Are these two files interconnected?
I think they would be. I think that would be untenable to stay in Syria after they've had to leave Iraq. I don't think there's anything else to be happening. I think that's why we're hearing some stirrings about, well, hey, Kurds, you're on your own, and they're going to find this out as Zelensky's found out in Ukraine. It's to be what is it? The phrase, it can be deadly to be an ally of the U.S., and that's what's going to happen. The Lion of Damascus will ultimately triumph. I think that's what we're seeing.
So in this case, in the Syrian case, Daniel, what's the mood in Washington, D.C.? Like the American forces in Syria, we know that they're blocking the Syrian government access to the oil fields. Like they literally loot the oil and sell it to the Iraqi markets, and they finance their stay in Syria. So some people say, like, the Americans aren't really paying much money to stay in Syria, right? But there are soldiers there in ways of harm. I mean, those are the sons of the American people, right? I mean, and there are rockets falling over their heads every day nowadays. I mean, what's the strategy of the U.S. In Syria? Why are they in Syria? Just to block the access of the Syrians to their oil, or is there a grand strategy in their minds?
Well, that's the weak underbelly of this policy. And my good friend Scott Horton did a great piece on antiwar.com the other day about why are these American troops being used as nothing more than tripwires in the region? Because the neocons in D.C. want their war against Iran, so they're willing to sacrifice American men and women in uniform to serve as that tripwire. It's the opposite of patriotism and pro-Americanism. So I think that is what ultimately will convince Americans that this is a terrible policy. Now, we're there to fight ISIS. Well, all of a sudden, you may have seen, though, ISIS is popping up here and there. If someone's talking about them, they're trying to use that as a bogeyman when they have nothing else. However, I think that train has left the station. And as you say, I think people are going to start waking up and saying, well, hang on a minute. Why are we there? They don't want us there, and our troops are in danger.
Yeah, I will show the map of control over Syria, Daniel, just for the people to understand this big lie about ISIS, right? This is the map of control over Syria. And guys, the red is the government-held areas, right? And the yellow are where the US forces are stationed, and in this green area. You see these black pockets? Those are the remaining pockets of ISIS. And all their attacks, not even, there is no exception. All of them is on this area where the Syrian soldiers are, Syrian army posts are located. So there are no attacks against the American forces. There are no attacks where the Americans are. And these few ISIS pockets that are left, if, in my opinion, the Americans leave and they allow the Syrian government to have an access for the oil and fuel, which means that they can use it to generate electricity. If they have electricity, they have, again, production. When they have production, they have a better economy. When they have better economy, they have more effective army to fight against these ISIS, remaining ISIS elements, right, in Syria. But if you weaken the Syrian government, if you create a power vacuum, if you impose sanctions on the main force that is fighting against the ISIS forces, and then you come and say, but we are there, we have to fight against ISIS. You're actually doing the opposite by staying in Syria, and you're encouraging more ISIS elements to be active in this area, because the main enemy of ISIS is the Syrian government. And when the United States was trying to overthrow the government in Damascus, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the so-called Free Syrian Army, they were all together having a mutual enemy, and that is Assad in this case, right?
Well, remember Jake Sullivan, the current national security advisor to President Biden, who once wrote to his mentor Hillary Clinton in the Obama administration, well, in this situation, Al-Qaeda is on our side.
Yeah.
A very honest, probably the only time he's ever been honest in his life. But you know who else really wants that tripwire there? And they don't care if American soldiers gets killed, and that's Israel. Because with America completely gone, Israel is facing it's a tiny island facing a lot of countries that are very irritated with its behavior lately. So I think that's another very important factor.
Yeah. Daniel, it was amazing chatting with you today about this very important case. You're the executive director of Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Guys, his X account in the description below, and also his website and the blog, or all are in the description below. Hit him a follow, and also supporting a work that he's doing is very important. A work that is first intellectual, and secondly, it's humanistic, right? We need voices like Daniel in the United States to also echo the voices of the Palestinians and other people who have lived enough misery in the past, in my opinion, decades, due to this divide and conquer strategy, regime change wars and wars. I mean, people like Daniel is like a brother to me, like there is no hatred against the American people. People need to understand that this hatred that is generated against America is because of a foreign policy, because of the war machine. And we have so much in common, between us than that separate us compared to what separate us. Therefore, we have to create bridges between each other in order to promote for peace. And this is the reason why I create this channel, Syriana Analysis. So thank you very much, guys, for watching this live streaming today. I appreciate you all. I will tomorrow post an interview I did with an American journalist on this channel. So please follow this channel, like this video, send it to your friends. And if you like to support my independent work, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you soon.